Greetings, party people. Welcome to Boxing Equals Success with Best Pugilist. Yeah, today, I'm going to do my longer-awaited channel on YouTube. Although I've actually had this channel since about 2010, 2011. I just never really used it to do any commentary on boxing. I was usually either in the gym working, and I started putting up more posts and video on my old Instagram page, which was hacked. And I haven't gone back and made a new page yet. But I'll spend some time with some other boxing channels, most notably the boxing section, with my bros over there, and giving my views, what I think of the sport, which I've been involved with. This being my 41st year in the sport. I haven't been a fighter, now a trainer, coach / manager, looking to develop talent. But what we're here for is to talk about the mega fight between Terrance "Bud" Crawford and Erroll "the Truth" Spence. I like to give my prediction of what I feel is going to happen in this fight. It's an excellent fight. Two of the best boxers on the planet, probably in the past, definitely within the past 10 years. And this fight is an absolute mega fight for this generation. One of the biggest fights, for sure, without question, in the past 10 years, and maybe going as far back as a good 30 or 40 years now. But I want to get to the point of, my view as I see it, with the outcome of this fight. I've been checking out a few boxing channels on YouTube. Everybody has their, their view and their prediction on the fight, what they think is going to happen. But one thing I always learned from my trainer and the many other excellent boxing people I was around since I was a kid, the best way to view any up-and-coming good to great fight is to keep it simple. To keep it simple and just look at the history where the fighters involved and the intangibles around it. Just keep it simple. And as I see this fight, which is an excellent fight, you got two of the most complete and dominant fighters in their division. In Terrance Crawford, you have a 3-division champion, which automatically, as far as I'm concerned, puts him in Hall of Fame status. I see a lot of these guys on YouTube and even on Twitter, which I heard is now X. I don't be on there much though. But giving their opinion. A lot of casuals, fans, who really don't know the history of the sport. And in great part due to a lot of these cats is real young. So they don't really know the full history of it. Although on YouTube you can go in there and study hundreds of thousands of fights to really learn the history of this beloved game, boxing. which is affectionately called the sweet science. You know? So, with that said, I'm just gonna cut to the chase as far as, how I see this fight going and unfolding. And when I look at both fighters, super talented, very close in the department of intangibles and the importance of winning this fight. But when you have two fighters that are this closely matched up, I tend to go back to the basic format and principle. I go all the way back to the beginnings of their careers as amateurs. Erroll Spence was an elite amateur fighter. Made the Olympic team. You have to be an excellent boxer to make that Olympic team. You have to defeat styles from all across the country to make that team. A lot of these newfangled boxing fans and these YouTubers, they like to try to minimize a fighter's amateur pedigree and try to, debunk it and not give them the credit that's deserved for having been a successful amateur. And that's one of the worst things you could do. One of the worst things you can do. History has shown boxing has a long, great history where many of the fighters that we know and love that were successful amateurs and went on to being either good to great professionals. And I go back to that. I look at that foundation. And when I look at that foundation, that gives me the basis from which I can look at and tell in the clutch who can come through and win this fight. And when I look at both of them, we have Erroll Spence, who was an elite amateur. Terrance Crawford was a good amateur. Erroll Spence had a record of 135-12, while Crawford had a record of 58-12. That's good. It's not elite. Spence was elite. He was always the better fighter, going back to the amateur days. Now, a lot of people will try to downgrade that, and that's usually people who truly don't know much about boxing, who have never done it and don't really know much about it. But history has proven over and over again that when you take a quality, elite amateur boxer, especially one who was good enough to make that Olympic team, for most countries, but particularly, I'm speaking specifically here in the United States of America, these guys tend to be very good to great. They have a pedigree that the average fighter doesn't tend to have. There's a lot of great discipline that's developed in a fighter who's able to do that. And taking nothing away from Crawford, super talented guy, very athletic, very determined, got it from the mud. But as I explained to one of my good boxing buddies from Santos Boxing, and some of my brothers on the boxing section, I liken this fight in some ways to the Ray Leonard Marvelous Marvin Hagler fight. You have a lot of people to this day that feel that Ray didn't win the fight. I totally disagree. He did just enough to win it, to pull it out. But the factors of that fight that are similar to this fight are that you have two great boxers who were both considered the top fighter in the sport at one time or another. One having been an amateur superstar and Olympic champion, one who was a good amateur, but had a better development, as a pro once he turned pro. Got it from the mud, which was Marvin Hagler. But Sugar Ray Leonard was a superstar, amateur. He won everything you can win in the amateur ranks. Great pedigree. His record was 145-5 as an amateur. He won everything worth winning. You know, Marvin Hagler, on the other hand, good amateur. He won, if I remember correctly, the 1973 AAU championship, which was a big thing back then. But that was, you know, pretty much the height of his amateur success. And these things tend to carry on over into their pro ranks. Now, there are exceptions to the rules. You have great amateurs who sometimes don't live up to it. Prime example is one of my big bros. I was around as a kid in the gyms, and he was the man, one of the men here in New York, Howard Davis Jr., who, by the way, won the outstanding boxer of that tournament over Sugar Ray Leonard, both the Spence brothers, Leo Randolph, who were all gold medalists in that tournament. You know? So when I have to fall back on something, this is what I fall back on. I go all the way back to their pedigree from the start. And when I look at that, I just see that difference. The same way Ray Leonard was able to mentally, because he was a blue chipper, just as Erroll Spence came into the pro ranks as a blue chipper. Now, Crawford was a super talented dude. He's actually probably overachieved in many people's eyes. I wouldn't necessarily be one of them because the kid had talent, but you never know. You know, he lost to my little homie here from New York, Saddam Ali, in the Olympic trials. You know, whereas Spence was able to make that team and caught a bad decision. He caught a bad decision in the Olympics. They tried to get him twice in it, but they got him the second time. They tried to get him the first one of his earlier fights, but they got him in the second fight. But of that team, he was the best of that team. And that team had Marcus Brown, talented kid. He used to come out to my gym out here in Rockaway. Spar with one of my JO champion. And Saddam, talented kid, multiple time New York City Golden Glove champion. And when I look at it, you know, specifically with these two, I just always felt Spence was that elite guy from that team. And he's the Ray Leonard of that group, in my opinion. And I just see him, you know, with his solid fundamentals, but some people seem to think that that's not a good thing, but it's an excellent thing in the sport of boxing. When you got good fundamentals, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be very successful as a pro. Crawford, on the other hand, decent fundamentals, very good athleticism. It's part of the reason why he's able to switch back and forth from both sides and fight like that. You have to have pretty good athleticism to do that, you know? But I will say this. Although I'm predicting Spence to win this fight, if there's anyone that's capable of beating Erroll, outside of maybe a young, talented guy like maybe Jerron Boots Ennis out of Philadelphia, Crawford is the one who could do it. But as far as I'm concerned, he's gonna have to box his best match. He has to use his speed and his athleticism, his ability to move. Because I would expect that Erroll is going to bring the fight to him behind that hard, stiff jab. He's going to come to him with that hard, stiff jab, looking to back him up and forcing him into getting into exchanges with him, which he doesn't need to do, especially not early in the fight. Crawford needs to stay behind his jab, either from the right-handed or the southpaw stance, maneuver, give a lot of movement, use that jab, move around, pick his shots. Don't be there to engage too early. But this is where I think he's going to falter. Because like Marvin Hagler, whenever you go up against, in most instances, like I said, there are exceptions to the rule, that guy who got it from the mud, having so much to prove, will put themselves in situations that he doesn't have to win the fight. It's like Marvin Hagler gave away the first 4 rounds of that fight against Ray, trying to prove he was as good a boxer as Sugar Ray Leonard. And he clearly wasn't, especially at that time in his career. Maybe some years earlier, he was a lot close. It's one of my big bros who I trained with as a kid, who was a mentor to me as well, was a former middleweight champion, Vito Antuofermo. And Vito told me himself, face to face, he used to call me Cash, short for Cassius Clay. He used to call me Little Cassius Clay. He used to be like, don't let nobody fool you. Marvelous Marvin Hagler is every bit as good a boxer as Ray Leonard. He's just bigger and he's a southpaw. Now, at one time in his career, that was true. But at that time he fought Ray Leonard, it wasn't true. And I think that had more to do with, he had a few tough fights at that time, but I think it had more to do with that hard training regimen he had for all those years, finally starting to catch up to him. But the psychological warfare, him being that guy who had to get it from the mud, as opposed to being that guy who was considered the man from the amateur ranks into the pro ranks to be a star. He was always competing with that. And this is what I kind of see with Terrance Crawford. He's going to be competing with that, with Erroll. You know, they fought in the amateur ranks around the same time, so fighters know each other. He knew Erroll was the man. So he's been in pursuit of getting to that status ever since he's entered the welterweight division. But as I see it, I just see Erroll controlling the pace of the fight, working behind a good hard stiff jab, forcing Terrance into exchanges, and Terrance going to meet him in those exchanges, which I think he shouldn't do, particularly early. I think if he fight this fight similar to how he fought the guy from Romania, I always forget his name. He just lost. He just got stopped recently. It'll come back to me, but I always forget his name for some reason. Lithuania, the guy from Lithuania. But it'll come back. But either way, he need to fight like that. Now, if he fights like that, he has a much better chance, in my opinion, of winning that fight. But if he comes in there, I felt that fight may be close, very similar. Errol's going to fight that fight very similarly to how he fought Ugai. It's just that Terrance Crawford could do a little bit more things than Ugai, you know, with his leg movement and the way he can put his punches together on the move if he needs to. But you know, with that said, I'm expecting it to be a good fight. I know both brothers are gonna give it all they got. But this is a legacy fight for the both of them. So they're both gonna give everything they have, you know, to try to come out on top. Because this is gonna put them in a very unique space in the annals of boxing, whoever wins this fight. So I know they're both gonna go hard. And I see a lot of people talking about the size factor. It's going to play a part, I think, but it's not going to be the main factor. It's going to come down to skill. You know, a lot of people have this fight as a 50-50 fight. Talent-wise, it is a 50-50 fight. Without question, it's a 50-50 fight based on talent alone. But I don't have it 50-50. Because when I look at the intangibles of the fights and the overall skill set of both fighters and the mindset, I see that favoring Erroll Spence. He's more like Ray Leonard when it comes to that. Whatever particular style he sets out to do, he can ride it all the way through. Whereas Terrance Crawford, on the other hand, he can be triggered into doing things that he doesn't want to do. Like in that fight against Mean Machine, Kavaliauskas, he had no business getting knocked down. But that's because, one, I personally feel he underestimated him a little bit, which he shouldn't have done, because that guy was an Olympic boxer as well from his country. Two, you're letting yourself be pulled into something and engaging with a guy who has showed an ability to punch early, when he could have just worked behind his jab and set him up early and do what he eventually did, which get him out of there later. And as far as that knockdown, which they didn't call a knockdown, it was clearly a knockdown. His knee clearly hit the ground. So with those things stated, I have to, when I look at both of them, and you ask me who can I count on to be most likely to stick to their plan and do what they have to do all the way throughout the fight, I have to lean towards Erroll Spence Jr. I'm expecting Crawford to do what he typically does. When he gets pushed like that, he's going to fight back. And when he fights back against Spence, it's going to be a problem for him. You know, because Spence is the most skilled fighter, because he absolutely doesn't get the props he deserves for his boxing IQ. That's why you have fools actually picking Mikey Garcia over him. And you have some of his own alum, some of his own Olympic alum like Sugar Ray Leonard, to name a few, picking Mikey Garcia against him. He's bugging. This kid is one of the most fundamentally sound and overall skilled boxers I've ever seen. When he's throwing them shots out of that southpaw position, and he throws that straight left, keep that right hand up, guarding his face. It's a thing of beauty, man. Mastery. The little subtle things he does in the ring, man. Impressive. You know? His hands, for the most part, is always in the proper position. You know? Hands held high, tight defense. They have great condition. You know, this kid is something special, man. And I think this fight is gonna show that, you know. But I'm expecting it to be a good fight either way. I know Terrance is gonna come out and give his best effort. And but I just don't think it's going to be good enough now. Like I said, anything is possible. But I think for as long as it lasts, it's good. It should be quite the exciting match. But you know, stranger things have happened, you know, in the sport. You know, just the other day, man, I saw the brother Stevie Fulton get pretty much dominated by Inoue. Didn't see that happening at all. You know, yeah, I gave Inoue a chance to win, but I'm leaning towards Stevie. You know, I was rooting for him all day. You know, because he's a complete boxer. He's the best boxer in that division. But he pretty much got dominated in that fight. And I didn't see that. So anything is possible. You know, I've seen it many years. I've seen that happen. So, you know, with that said, I'm expecting it to be a great fight. You know, I'm gonna looking to start posting more, be a little bit more active on this channel. I'm gonna be back in the gym heavy, working with my charges, getting them right. So I'm gonna start posting more stuff on this channel and giving more of my takes on upcoming fights and just the overall impact that these fights have on the sport of boxing and its history. I'm going to also be posting up some footage from my training sessions with my fighters and my clients as well, and let's look to give an overall you know, insight into the sweet science and bring y'all into the world of best pugilists. Best pugilist is the way. Peace.